Okay, so hello to everybody. What we started with was what I called the pillars. I call the whole thing the pillars of orthodoxy. All of these pillars is not necessarily people. Sometimes they're instances. Sometimes they're documents. But they all led. Everything that we're going to be talking about is laying the foundation for the church and making it grow. Okay, that's the whole purpose of what we're communicating. The foundation of the faith. And that's why when we first talked, we talked about Peter and Paul, because they were extremely significant in the founding areas of our faith. We talked about James, the stepbrother of Christ, first bishop of Jerusalem. He's credited with writing the first liturgy. And something very, very important that we're going to cover tonight now, and that is he, through his following, and the other elders that were with him, and as well as all the apostles, but it was through James, the leadership of James, that the concept that we hold so true to our values of our church, and one that we will not ever leave, is that we're a church of councils, we're a church of people. And what we're going to see today now is how those councils are going to grow into legitimate patriarchates, and the problems that it will create along the way. We talked a little bit about the gentleman I'm circling here, Constantine the Great. All of this is in reference to Constantine the Great, and like I say, you can get the whole story if you go on to the first presentation, which is now downloaded for you. But Constantine is known as equal to the apostles. The things that he did were just amazing. Gus Photios has his namesake here. We're going to be talking a lot about him. Constantine the Great, I think we left it off at the Edict of Milan. I had a question last week. Why did they call it last month? Why did they call it the Edict of Milan? And that's because at that time, you remember what we talked about, that there were the Roman Empire was broken into four different sees, four different areas of leadership, and there were four Caesars, and one in each one of these. And Milan was where the Roman government was at times, and at this time, this is where the Edict of Milan was written. The purpose and the understanding of the Edict of Milan is that this is the first time now that Christianity is to be accepted. Constantine is the one who did this. He went and did many battles in 311 AD, defeated at the bridge of Milvian, Maxentius, and led us to this Edict of Milan, which said everybody in catacombs doesn't have to go to a catacomb anymore. Everybody in the catacomb can come out and be free to have their services. And they came out and started building gatherings. They were gathering in homes at first. They would worship over tombstones of the saints. They would go and have, they bring some of the tombstones. Actually, they took some of those into the catacombs, and then in the gatherings, they would pray around the stones. In other words, sharing the concept of the relics, like we do today, with the relics in our altar. And so this Edict of Milan in 313 allowed for it did not make orthodoxy or Christianity. Everything's Christianity at this point. It didn't make it the sole religion of the world. That's not what it did. It allowed the freedom of the religion. Okay, making it the sole religion will come later. All right. So Constantine is now in power, and he's going to do some more things. This is the first great thing he did, but now he's going to do some others that are going to really set the foundation for the church. And the one that you see listed there is that he's going to call for a council. He's going to get everybody together. He says, hey, and he's right. Things are not where they should be right now. We need to organize, we need to define, and if we want this to grow. Constantine was a great organizer. And so he established a meeting date in Nicaea, 325 AD, which is in Turkey. It's it's close to Constantinople. And of course, they're not in Constantinople yet, they're still in Rome. Keep that in mind. And he invited all the leaders of the churches in all areas. They came from Egypt. We're going to talk about one in particular. And they came from all the areas, from Turkey, from Greece, and so forth. And they met to iron out differences. One of the main issues was this issue of Arianism that you see listed there. Arius was a priest. He was a priest in Egypt. And he believed very strongly that Christ, we accept Christ with two natures, right? When we do our cross, right? What do? We hold our three fingers together, and the bottom two fingers are the fingers for the two natures of Christ. Top three of the Holy Trinity, bottom two of the two natures of Christ. And Arius just didn't buy into that. He felt that if Christ was born on earth, then there was an earth Christ, and not to be confused with the Christ of God. They're two separate. This is known as the concept of Arianism. Okay, and so it came to a head in 325 AD. It was one of the main topics of discussion at this council, and this is the first ecumenical council. We are going to see tonight there were 7. Some of you, I'm sure, may be familiar with that. There were 7 ecumenical councils. And I'm just going to point out to you the further pillars that were established with each one of these councils. Each one did something great. To date, we've had other gatherings, and there were other gatherings back then. There was a Photian council by St. Photios. And that was in the 9th century. We're going to talk about that one today. All these, it wasn't just the 7, but these were the primary 7, and especially this first one did so much to establish the church. Also present at the first one was the Bishop of Egypt. Like I said, Arius was from Egypt. And Athanasius, who we refer to as the Great. You can't be called the Great unless you do something great, and Athanasius has did a lot of great things as a foundation for our faith. And one of them was that he attacked Arianism, as did a few others. And we're gonna catch up with that shortly. Some of the things that I do want to highlight as we go along on this first council. It established the creed. All right, there was no creed at the time, no way of identifying anybody for the parishes to join the services, and so the first 7 verses of the creed were put together. Okay, it's interesting. I always point this out that there's a phrase that the every priest on Sunday narrates in the theology in the service, where it says that Thetas, and Sophia proscome. The doors, wisdom let us attend. Makes absolute no sense. What does that mean? The doors, and wisdom let us attend. And unless, like today, the history behind it, and that is because at that time, people were walking all around the places the meetings were. They were wandering into the service areas. There was just no really control necessarily. And plus the fact that, we were the fathers were trying to spread the faith. So they invited people into the services. I mean, they wanted them to hear how beautiful it was and to grow with the service. And but at one point, we're getting ready to say the creed now. The 7 verses at that time, the first 7 verses of the creed. And the creed has to be the identity of those who are of the faith, needs to be recited. So they would ask everybody who's not of the faith, it's time for you to leave now. Thank you for coming, and come and join us again next week, because we're going to take communion now and so forth, and this is not what you're prepared for. All right, so they say, security people, attend to the doors, and would you please escort everybody out while we continue with our service. So let's talk about the Roman calendar here. We got Marianne Zitzus coming in. All right, the calendar, as I started to say, is off. And I did mention too that several of you may have already heard this in one of my previous presentations. I'm sure. I'll try to go through it quickly, but there are a lot of people who have not heard it. So the calendar was off. It's only 10 months. Originally it was only 10 months Okay, and that's what the Julian calendar is. Julius Caesar is the one who had it commissioned, and it was 10-month calendar. Now, I can prove that to you real easily, and we can test your Greek here. If we look at October, and I ask you the first 4 digits there for October, ochto. I mean, if you're those who speak Greek out there know that ochto is the number 8. See, so that is the 8th month, but it's not the 8th month, it is the 10th month. We go to December, and you see the 4 letters there are deca, right? Deca is 10 in Greek, but it was the 10th month right then, but you know, we have 12 months. Okay, I'm just pointing out to you, and as of course September, septa is Latin for 7. So the calendar was off, all right, and our dates are all off, and it'd be too much of a hassle to try and reestablish dates to correct. I mean, there's another problem you're going to see in a second. But anyhow, Pope Gregory commissioned a gentleman by the name of Dionysios Exiguus to come up with a new calendar to catch up to a lot of the dates. And he did fine, except he sort of exasperated the situation and made it a little bit worse even, because the formula he used was in establishing the date. He used the birth of Christ as the establishment. So Christ would have been the first year, and we would going forward would be AD, going backwards would be BC. But if you look at it here, and those who are really sharp can see the mistake, right? What he left out, and he left out a 0 right here. It should have been 0. It should have been 1, then 0, and then 1. So it would be -1, 0, +1, 0. So when he finished the calendar, he just made it another one that was 2 years off. But fundamentally, it's the calendar that we use today. It's the Gregorian calendar. And we use it along with our brothers and sisters of the Catholic faith and all Christians, except for certain dates. The major one, actually the only one, is the date of Easter. For some reason, and I've tried to research this and could not come up with a really good answer, but the original formula was the first full moon after the first Sunday following the vernal equinox, provided that the Hebrew Passover had been completed. I say the Hebrew Passover because, surprise to many people, at that time of what we call today Easter, is really Passover in our church. And you just have to look to the Greek word Pascha. Pascha does not mean Easter in Greek, it means Passover. Okay? So we celebrate Passover, folks, but we celebrate the new Passover. Christ is the new Passover. Christ is replacing everything. Christ is replacing the Old Testament. If you look, there are many instances that show what God did in the Old Testament is equal to and same in many respects to what Christ did in the New Testament, even down to the crucifixion. When Moses freed the Jews from the oppression of the Pharaoh, the last thing was a disease came down and killed all the firstborn, and everybody was to put blood, lamb's blood, over the doorpost so that the disease could pass over. It's where the word Passover came from. And the blood, the shedding of the blood of the sacrificed lamb is what saved the people. Well, the crucifixion is the shedding of the blood of the Lamb of God, Christ, on the wood, on the cross. The same thing, the wood over the door and the wood of the cross. I could do a whole class just on those analogies, that there are so many inferences to the Old Testament to the New Testament. The difference is the Old Testament is setting up the New Testament. The New Testament is fulfilling the Old Testament, okay? So we've got this new, like I said, this new verse. Oh, there it is. There's the correct way he should have done it. But poor Dionysius Exiguus, which literally means Dennis the Short in English, and he was short with the Bible by a couple of years. Okay, so let's continue on with this now. We're going to come back to some of these things, but I wanted to show you this and talk a little bit about this gentleman here, this saint right here. You can see he's dark-skinned. Of boy, my thing's jumping around. He's dark-skinned because he's from Egypt, from Africa, and that is Saint Athanasios. His relics you see below there, right here. We're in the church of Saint Zachariah, which is right down the street in Venice, Italy, from this church here. This church is the Church of St. George. It's the only Greek Orthodox church on Venice, on the island of Venice. And the other church is the Church of Saint Zacharias. That's a Catholic church. St. George is a Greek Orthodox church. St. Zacharias is a Catholic church, and that's where Athanasios has been interred. And that's him right here, and right above him, right here, is the tomb of Saint Zacharias. Athanasios just did some incredible things, all right, as I said. The first thing is with this issue of Arianism. And let me go down further here. I think there it is, that's what I'm looking for. So we're talking about the First Ecumenical Council now. Okay, the Council of Nicaea, all right. So we've got the, Arius presenting to the council people that that the two natures of Christ means it's separate natures, not the same person, separate people. And this icon here shows you of Saint Spiridon, and he's holding a flaming something there, which is called a potsherd, and it's down here at the bottom here, which says Saint Spiridon converted a pagan philosopher to Christianity by using a potsherd. And if you didn't know what that was, it's a piece of pottery. Anyhow, he took a piece of pottery and tried to explain the Holy Trinity. He said, look at this, and it became fire in his hand. It's made of three elements, he said, fire, sand, and water. And as he was describing as the potsherd became fire, then it became sand, and then it became water. And he said, but as a whole, it's like a brick, like a pot. That's what I think a potsherd was. It was like this solid piece, and that's what the Holy Trinity is, and that's what the natures of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And you cannot split the Father, the Son from the Father, because they are one. Just as you can't take water out, or sand out, or fire out of a brick. It must need all three. So he's commemorated for that miracle that happened at this meeting. So, okay, we've established the date of the Pascha. So just remember that now, all right? Next, this Easter coming up, it's Pascha. We're not going to say Easter, right? We'll say Pascha because it's the new Passover for Christ. First 7 verses were established, and they reaffirmed the Orthodox Church is a church of council. So there's the first statement now. The first action was James, the brother of Christ, responding to the calls from Peter and Paul, who went to him for an issue on circumcision. I'm not going to go into all the details. Watch the first presentation. But the result was the decision was made based on the council that was there with him. Councils. So we are now a church of councils, and it's affirmed by the First Council of Nicaea. Okay, so let's move on. As things started to develop, another issue developed through this. We're looking at we're up to the Second Council of the Second Ecumenical Council, which was in 381 AD. Picture at the bottom right is St. Irene Church. It's a magnificent church. If you get to go to Turkey, to Constantinople, Istanbul, today Istanbul, that church is there exactly like that. It was built for way back here in this 4th century. It was used for services. It's a magnificent church. I've attended services there. They actually did a concert there for the choir of the Archdiocese, did a performance there for us. And at this time, that's the church that was available. Hagia Sophia is still 200 years away. But there developed an issue known as the Filioque, and it's right here in the middle, number 9. You see it in red. And it's just 3 words, and the Son. And it's amazing that this is the second step that is going to eventually lead to the fall of the church. The church is going to split in 1054. A lot of people always say, "The church split, your church split." Our church is split in 1054. Well, that's not an accurate statement. 1054 was the final straw, let's say. The churches started to split in 330 AD, which I'm going to talk to you about next. But right now, we're at the Second Ecumenical Council. I just want to finish the second one because it involves the remaining part of the creed. You see here 4 verses. These are the 4 verses that were added to the creed. And the reason they were added was because, it's not the reason, but they just needed a better definition of Arianism. That is the reason why they added it. And he will come again with glory to judge the living and the dead. His kingdom shall have no end. I mean, you're all very familiar with this. In one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, all right, just one church. It's a beautiful statement, and I think that we have to say. But through the centuries, this thing called the Filioque grew, and what it did was it added 3 words to the statement there in yellow, in gold, who proceeds from the Father. Let me just skip it right now. Who proceeds from the Father, who together with the Father and Son is worshiped and glorified as both of the prophets. Well, those 3 words they added now made it who proceeds from the Father and the Son. This happened in the 8th century, by the way. We're jumping centuries ahead, but I do want to fill it in at this point. And the Son. What does that do? That goes back to Arianism. All right, it defeats the Holy Trinity, because if you think it through now, who proceeds, and in the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the Creator of life, who proceeds from the Father, the Holy Spirit, they're saying proceeds from the Father and the Son. That means the Son, you know, that the Holy Spirit comes from the Son. Well, that's not the equal Holy Trinity. That's a split. And the churches fought this, huge battles. Even the Catholic Church supported those who attested that this was inaccurate, that it was impossible for the Holy Spirit to proceed from the Son. Okay, it comes from the Father. The Father is God, and God is 3 departments: the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. So this will be something that is going to lead, and you're going to hear me talk about it as we get closer to the actual split of the 2 churches. Okay, so let's move on here a little bit more. Something else I want to cover, and I didn't mention it yet before we go too further here along. And that is one of the other things that Constantine the Great did was that he didn't like where Rome was, where the situation, you know, even Milan or whatever, all of it. They weren't basically seaports. They were located. Rome has 7 valleys, 7 hills that they're famous for. Not very well to defend itself. You could surround the city very easily. You could surround the walls very easily. Most great military men liked water areas, seas. And so he commissioned some of his people to go out and find a better spot. And he found this spot off the shores of Turkey. The place was known as Byzea, B-Y-Z-E-A. It's probably where they got the word, the name itself, Byzantium. And Constantine liked it, and it became a point, sort of like a point it's like a triangle formed on the water there. And I was supposed to put a picture in here of it, and I didn't, and I apologize. So you're going to have to tune in next week to see a picture of it, unless you go on your websites and just type in Constantinople, and you'll see it there. So they moved the Roman Empire. Okay, now this is something we never learn about in school. Okay, and I don't know if they do it to this day, but I know I never learned a thing about this in school. That Constantine moved the Roman Empire from Rome to Byzea, which he named after himself now, Constantinople. Constantine named it after himself. And all the things that he did for the church, he's entitled to it. So it's Constantinople. All right, and if you're looking for the seeds that created the circumstances for the split of 1054, there's your first one right there. That move, okay? Just imagine now, you got the Pope in Rome, who considers himself equal to the apostles, actually beyond, I'm sorry, considers himself equal to Peter, the sub of Peter, the representative of Peter on earth, the representative of Christ on earth. And through what we know as the Petrine Promise, He established, he put himself in a position where he felt that he was the first of all these areas that are about to develop. When I say areas about to develop, I'm talking about centers of the church. We're right at the initial development of the church back in the 2nd century, 1st century, 2nd century. You're only talking 3 areas: Rome, Antioch, and Alexandria. Those are the 3 areas of the church. Actually, there were 2 areas first: Rome and Antioch. With Constantine moving the center of the Roman Empire and the government from Rome to Constantinople, there was a gathering at that time of priests and everything. They had a bishop, and that area became a strong religious area. And so by the Second Ecumenical Council, you can see there, 381 on your chart here, see it? And I've added this, that Constantinople was elevated to a patriarchate as the new Rome. This was in 381 AD. Constantine moved it in 330 AD, but this did not sit well with the Catholic, what would become the Catholic Church, what was then the Pope of Rome, because it's always been our understanding from the beginning, even before Constantinople, that Rome was the first, okay? Peter established, they say that Peter established the Church of Rome, or he gets credit for it, although there's lots of controversy over that because there's very little documentation that Peter was in Rome much. He was there for his execution, but there's very little said about him being there for other things, as opposed to Antioch, where Peter, actually established the church in Antioch, and there's a lot of documentation of what he did in Antioch. So he's considered the first bishop of Antioch. But as far as Rome is concerned, he's been given the title. It was the first establishment of a religious body. And so not even Jerusalem at this time. Rome, amongst all the churches there at that time, and all the way up to 1054, to the split, was known as first among equals. Now, you understand now what I just said, because you understand what it means, the first among equals, right? Equals means that it's everybody, councils that form the body of Christ here, as far as the establishment of it and the growth of it and the government of it, okay? And this now just sort of sets a strong foundation, number one, but number two, with the introduction of Constantinople into the formula, you now have really 4 areas, and one more is going to be added here in a minute. And the Constantinople has this very deep, strong body of following, spiritual, theological following. And so that's starting to create a problem with the Pope and Rome. And so you're going to see things develop that are going to continue to grow and lead and cause some controversy. If we go down to the next ecumenical council, you can see that the Constantinople, that reaffirmed that Christ was truly true God, the only begotten Son, and Jerusalem was elevated to a patriarchate. That note always surprised me, because wouldn't you think Jerusalem might have been the first? That's where all the action was there, but it's not. It wasn't until the Third Ecumenical Council that Jerusalem was elevated to the point of a patriarchate. And by that, what's elevated first is the priest is elevated to a bishop, and the bishop, is, they were elevated to patriarchs. The Catholic Church uses the word Pope, which means Father, Holy Father, and you hear him referred to as Holy Father, as the patriarch means the father, the patriarch, the head of. So it's the same word, just one's Latin and the other's of a Greek base. But now we have, with Constantine moving Constantinople in 330 through the second and finally the third patriarchate, we have the the ecumenical councils. We have the 5 seats of power, okay, that we're going to continue now through all the way up to 1453 even. And that is that Rome being the first among equals, followed now by Constantinople. Constantinople is now referred to, as I've indicated there on this chart that's in front of you, the new Rome, but still recognizing that Rome is the first one, first among equals, which again means they all have the same authority. You know, one cannot rule over the other. Only the councils rule within that group. So you got Rome, Constantinople, Jerusalem, that's the third place one, and then Antioch and Alexandria. Okay, so now we're going to move forward with all that. I don't think there's anything else I need to go over on these ecumenical councils, except that, well, you can see just some of the things, like on the 6th one, Jesus had 2 natures. He was truly human as well as truly divine. Now, the 7th one is a good one, all right? That is the one that established the iconography in our church. It vindicates the veneration of icons. That's the date we celebrate with the marching in of the icons on the first week of Lent. Very, very important day in our church. But again, it was done by councils. So it indicates, you know, it's another pillar of orthodoxy. Can you imagine our church without icons? Can you imagine our church and our homes now without icons? It's a focal point. It's a spiritual uplifting. It does so much for us, and you know, it's just a blessing that our church had the insight to move forward with it. Okay, and we're getting close to yeah, we're getting close now. All right, now the church is going to go through a period here right from the beginning. Like I told you, the very first thing was with the moving of the city, the government from Rome to Constantinople. And then in the 8th century, 9th century, somewhere around 800 something, we had the Philiki come into being. And that was a church in Spain that did this, Toledo, I believe it was Toledo, Spain, where for some reason they posted the creed. And you know that the creed is now at the 12 verses that we have today, and added those 3 words. Okay? The Catholic Church took opposition to that and had the creed carved in stone and placed in St. Peter's Cathedral over the altar of where St. Peter is. So it was dispersed initially, but it still presented a situation that became tenuous, let's say. And then we've got this period that we're going to get into now with St. Photios. Here's another great, St. Photios the Great. Now, let me say, I missed one thing I've forgotten. That the word the Great reminds me about Athanasius the Great. There's a lot of other things that he did. He saved us that day with Arianism. He fought for the defending of it. He was just a deacon at the time. But he also was commissioned to research all the writings that were out there, the other ones that there were so many heretical writings and so many good writings, and they couldn't differentiate. They had to really study these to differentiate what they were going to use for the Bible, which would eventually become the Bible. And Athanasius was in charge of that. Athanasius is the one that did the most research on it with a tremendous following that he had to research all this. And it's Athanasius and his committee that actually came up with the New Testament, 22 verses of the New Testament. And the apocryphal books that we refer to, that you hear me refer to often, which we in our church use today only for historical purposes. The apocryphal books are the books that were not selected to be in the Bible. Some of them came close, like the book of James, Proto-Evangelo of James, which I like very much because for the historical purposes. We have so many, some of our icons actually in church depict some of the events that are found in the book of James. But they could not identify the source. The source being, and this is another pillar that was established back at that time, the source being that it had to be connected and identified with Christ. Okay? Now, Christ was no longer there at the time. He had already ascended. So it was the apostles. It had to be identified that the link went back to the apostles, that the apostles either wrote it, the apostles sanctioned it, the apostles authorized it. It had to come from the apostles, the holy apostles. And as long as it did, it was available for, Athanasius actually had to determine which ones were available with that standard, that it had to go back to the apostles. So that is the dogma of our church. That was one of the things that was established at the councils. And that's an important issue. So we've got, though, this situation now where something is exposed, known as the Philiki. But now we're going to have a situation that's going to involve someone who's going to become known as Saint Photius. Actually, he's going to become known as Photius, then Saint Photius, and eventually Saint Photius the Great. And again, he had to do something great to be called the Great. So now, what did he do? There's an interesting thing about him. He was the first patriarch of Constantinople to initiate missionary work to the Slavs. He sent Cyril and Methodius to do the missionary work to all the Slavic nations. And Cyril, especially the Cyrillic alphabet, he created an alphabet. They created words, a language for the hymns that we use. And the Slavs to this day use that language. And so, we venerate greatly Cyril and Methodius for what they did, but it was Photius who sent them out. So Photius was known as the learning patriarch. He was the patriarch of Constantinople. Okay, it said there, first patriarch of Constantinople. But it's how he became patriarch that started to add to the seeds that we were talking about that would eventually lead to the split. The emperor was very well familiar with Photius and recognized how brilliant it was, a very brilliant student. And his patriarch had died, and he wanted to make Photius the new patriarch. Well, he wasn't even a priest. He wasn't even a deacon. He wasn't even anywhere near the clergy. He was not involved with it. But the emperor was very, very ingrained with this thought that this was the man, this was the right choice to lead the church. And so he had the week before Christmas, he had the church ordain Photius as the first day a deacon, second day a priest, the third day an archimandriti, archpriest, fourth day a bishop, fifth day an archbishop, and then on the sixth day they made him, or the seventh day they actually made him a patriarch. The Catholic Church, and I'm referring to them as the Catholic Church, just so you can identify with them. They're not a Catholic church yet. They're still Christians. The church in the church in the West, the Pope greatly objected to this, all right, and felt it was inappropriate, and there were no grounds for something like this. And he just said that Photius is not the emperor or the patriarch. The other four patriarchs said that, hey, we're a church of councils. Councils make those decisions, all right? And this council decided that he's going to be, we're going to go through this process, of the 7-day process. So it got so bad that the Pope excommunicated the Constantinople Patriarchate, excommunicated Photius. The other three patriarchates sided again with Constantinople, and this was a short battle. This was not a long thing. This was not a permanent thing. They finally decided to unite, and the Catholic, the Church in the West, acceded to the wishes of the other four areas. But it did impose something that was growing, and that was that the Pope was exerting a lot of their authority through the Petrum Promise. The Petrum Promise, going back now a little bit, Petrum Promise came where Christ asked the disciples, he said, "Who do you think I am?" And Peter is the only one who could answer that. The others could not come up with an answer. And Christ was getting a little discouraged that none of them could answer. And finally, Peter stood up. He said, "I know who you are. You are the Son of the living God." And Christ said, basically, "Wonderful, Peter. On that kind of understanding, I'm going to build the church." Now, remember, this is all written in Greek, okay? And in Greek, you got to interpret the Greek. And basically, what I just said to you is what the Greek was saying. At that time, and through the centuries, the church in the West took that to mean upon Peter, I'm going to build this faith. The word for rock in Greek is Petros, which is the name of Peter, Petros. So you could see the confusion, but the church in the West accepted the fact that Peter, the church was being built on Peter, and therefore, since he was the founder of the church in Rome, and the Pope is the Pope of Rome, the Pope is the one that gets the blessing from Peter and the primacy. Okay, and it's starting to grow, this aspect of primacy. And it really comes to a head in the 6th century with a pope by the name of Gelasius. I have him down here somewhere, and I'm afraid if I go too far away, I'm going to lose my place here, but somewhere around here it's going to pop up. But Gelasius was in 426, I believe it was, 422 to 426 AD was the Pope, only 4 years. He did a lot of good things. But one of the things he did was he really put forward in an encyclicals and many writings that the church, or not the church, sorry, the Pope is supreme when it comes to the church. In other words, it is not the first among equals, it's the first, period. And things are going to start to develop again. We're going to see all of a sudden now the Philiki come into being. This is after Photios. The Philiki is now going to be coming into being in the church in the West through the bishop, the Pope. Just stating, matter of fact, now it's time we're back to having the Philiki as part of our faith. And things are going to start to get very, very, very hectic. Let me just move on here. St. Photios will be excommunicated several times, twice during his reign, and he finally would retire in a place in Armenia. But he did many great things in setting up the church. He definitely, let me just go forward here. I don't know if any of you have been to the chapel in Florida, in St. Augustine, Florida. That's the main street you're looking at. And a lot of people don't realize it was indentured servants who were Greeks. Now, not slave servants, they were paid, but they were hired by people. This is the Alvera house. Alvera family hired Greek carpenters, Greek builders to come and build. This is the main street of the old city, the oldest city in the United States, of St. Augustine, Florida. And it was here they found, this is the original doors inside. It's this whole building, you see the Greek flag. And inside it is this magnificent chapel. Chapel's not big at all. It's about the size of, literally it's about the size of the front part of the church office, excluding Father Steve's office. It's that small, but it's in the shape of a cross, okay? And it's got something to it. It's fully painted with the icons. And when you walk in there, you feel, and just listening to the chanting, it's just a magnificent thing. This is where, I take my Sunday school class every 2 years. I think you've all have heard about this. And if you haven't gone there, it's anytime you go down south when we're going to be allowed to go travel again, this is one place that we should go to. Right now, it's the only shrine that the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese has in America. And it's just something, they got the relics of, I think it's like 30 of our saints there. They usually keep them. As a matter of fact, there it is right there. They got little pieces right there of the saints. But it's just a magnificent thing. And they named it St. Photios because people come there and they learn. They learn about our faith. And St. Photios was the leader of teaching. This is called St. George Street, all right, named after St. George, okay? And you'll see all the streets are named after, they're Greek names, most of them, not all of them, but most of the streets are all Greek names. And they actually found a cross inside here on the original ground before, this is the new building that was built on top of it. And so they know that the servants actually had services here. And this is the first, this site is given credit for having the first services that where people prayed, not the first church, but first services where they prayed, you know, at the end of the day. So it's a very, very interesting place to visit, and I hope you all get the opportunity to be in there. And, you know, I see I'm down to 7 minutes left, and I did get to St. Photios. I think I've covered everything. Let me just swing back. I want to make sure I got everything I was going to talk about today. And I hope some of you who have been with my classes many times picked up some new things. We talked about the Church of the Councils, Petrine Promise, Supremacy, Papal Supremacy, Apostolic Succession. That's the word I should have used a couple of times. Apostolic Succession is what our church believes in, okay? The church in the West believes Papal Supremacy. Our church in the East believes Apostolic Succession, which means that when the patriarch puts a blessing on the person who's going to become a bishop, it's coming through a link that goes back to the blessings through Christ. So it goes Christ to the apostles. The apostles appointed the first bishops. So apostolic succession went to the first bishops. And the first bishops did the priests. Apostolic succession, who eventually would become bishops. Apostolic succession. All of it is linked through the touching of hands, touching of the head, rightly, and it's known as apostolic succession. You know, the Catholic Church believes in papal supremacy, which means Peter, so just Peter to the Pope. Okay, talked about the Felucia. I think we did everything. We didn't get to, well, we're not going to do this Great Schism until next week, and then we'll do 1204 and maybe some other things. But you know, I do remind you all that what we're doing now is putting together. How did I lose my slide here? There it is. We're putting together our new program for next year. I did get one. Michael sent me a request. I offer it out to you. You know, tell us what interests you. Father, for Father Steve, Father for any of us, Father Paul, Father Nektarios. We have a lot of topics, and we're going to be presenting them, but that we offer you the opportunity to step up and say, hey, you know, this might be interesting. And the chances are we're probably going to agree with you and do a program on there for you.